Well, g'day everyone. We have Rachel Vaughan here today, and it's been a pretty interesting period for you after trying to slog out this information for a long, long time. I don't know if we want to go into the full history here, but I'm basically going to hand it over to Rachel to give a presentation here after there's been a lot going on with the historic Beaumont children case. And for those, I know there are some people that watch overseas. I would just suggest go back and watch some of your old videos. So if you want to send me the best ones, I'll put them under here if people want to get background around the whole case, because Rachel's got a lot of new information and stuff that we're going to put in today. But yeah, for those overseas, or that aren't familiar, like this would be the most famous and historic missing children's case in Australia. And has potential to be worldwide news, and then everything else that's connected to with your family and the cover up and all that. So it's we're at a very, very interesting time, and especially coinciding with Epstein being in the news and you stating that your father was the Australian Epstein. Anyway, I'll leave it over to you. But how have you been, first of all, just throughout this period? How's it been for you?
Well, it's always so there's it's a dichotomy. There's the nervousness of, are they going to do something really dodgy to make it look like they were always at a place that they were not, that the remains I'm talking about. So there was always that fear. And also every time anything like this comes up, of course, it dredges up all your childhood memories, and it's really, really hard. And I know my brother Andrew's been, struggling with it as well, but still doing his absolute best. And he's a very strong man. So it's been distressing at the
Yeah.
same time as, cathartic, because at least finally the Stansbury sinkhole has been spoken about in Adelaide's only paper. There's just some other papers, but the Advertiser pretty much controls the news in paper form, in South Australia. So I've got some articles that I'm going to share today just to show people the timeline of the events, and I'm going to go into some of the research that I've done, some of the evidence that I have, and it all ties back to what's going on with this Epstein thing at the moment. So it's all interrelated. I'll do my best to present it as clearly and concisely as possible. Again, obviously, there's a lot of trauma for me. So if my voice wavers or if I speak too quickly, it's because of the trauma aspect. And I do have a habit of smiling and laughing during things because I just cannot fucking believe, excuse my language, the ridiculousness of this not being investigated. But when you see how convoluted this is not just about children being stolen. This is about a state that's been involved in child trafficking and medical experimentation on children for decades. And that is why it hasn't come out.
Yeah.
People don't understand the complexity of it all.
Yeah, because I mean, at least on the surface, with the evidence that's been presented by your brother, that it should be pretty clear cut for the authorities, but they're obviously protecting something much, much bigger than three missing children.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I have that tendency to like laugh as well too, and people have like pulled me up on it when it's like very like serious or even like disgusting topics. I don't know why I do that, but I'm
Yeah.
glad you do it too, because then it's
Yeah.
the pressure takes the
Oh,
pressure
the
off.
trolls love it. The trolls love it. They go mental
Yeah,
over it.
yeah. Okay.
So
I'll
without
let you
further
go.
ado,
Yep. If you want to
all
share
right, I'll
screen,
start sharing.
you
Okay,
can
and
go.
I'll try and get through this as quick as I can. So just to start off with, I've shared this picture before. There we go. This is my father. He had altar parts. So when he was in his evil Max altar, this was the facial expression you would get. He had different aspects to his personality. So when my siblings that say they don't believe that he was an abuser talk about that, he did have an aspect that was like a fatherly, well, not fatherly, like a disjointed kind of, uh, confused person. He had a confused altar. He had like a professor type altar where he knew everything, and then he had this evil altar, and he also had a child altar. So when you have mind control,
In this picture here, with this bit, you're saying that's his evil altar there.
that's the evil altar, yeah, and that was caught on camera. So that's exactly the face that I used to run and hide under my bed because of, or run and hide in the chook yard. As soon as I saw that expression, I would run. And my dog, the dog that we had growing up, would do the same thing, Ninka. Okay. So on the 9th of February, it was announced in the Advertiser's digital paper that they were going to do a third dig at the Castaloy factory in North Plympton for the Beaumont children's remains. Now, this is based around a theory that a man called Harry Phipps, who used to own this factory, had some sort of connection to the Beaumont children disappearance. Now, the number one thing that they've tried to connect Phipps to this disappearance with is a £1 note that the children were given. Now, my father told my sister that he gave the children a £1 note. So our father, my sister and my brother have been speaking about this because they were witnesses to what happened on the day that the Beaumont children were brought to our property at Macklin Street Edwardstown on the day they went missing. So I'll go more into detail with that, but this was announced on the 9th of February. They always do these digs. This is the third one. They had one in 2013 and one in 2018 as well. None of them have found any bones. This dig was massive. Like, there were mountains of earth that they moved, and they dug down meters trying to look for this. Personally, in my opinion, and I can't say this with absolute knowledge, but it feels to me like this last search, just in the lead up, because it's 59 years since the children went missing, I feel like this was like they were going to really make this a big deal, really hype it up. And then 60th anniversary next year, I think they were going to try and say, oh, well, let's put it to bed. It's been 60 years, we'll never know. It's completely backfired because so many people have heard my brother's statements, my sister's statements, me talking about this in interviews, as well as Andrew, that they just flooded the mainstream media comment sections, Facebook, all of these sites with, why don't you dig at Stansbury? There's a lot of evidence involved. So
there's final dig in that title.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you said it was a £1 note, because that 66 was the last year of the British pound in Australia.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I wonder if that had anything to, because 66 was a very, very, very big year. But that's right, because the Australian dollar came, so it obviously hadn't come in then. It must have come in later in the year.
Wow.
I wonder if that was symbology for anything to say that they were given a £1 note. Because it would be interesting to find out the exact date that the pound ended, because it would have been
absolutely
definitely that year.
Yeah, well, hopefully some researchers will put some comments in, save you having to dig around. Okay, so this was also the Sunday Mail did the same thing. They're talking about this, let's have another dig, and they're actually putting it on the Beaumont children family have asked for this. They've asked for an inquest. I haven't heard any other talking about an inquest after the dig. The dig finished on Saturday. No one's talking about an inquest. So, there still needs to be an inquest into these missing children. So the family really wanted that. I don't think that they necessarily were really desperate for a dig, but they've used that as the excuse for the dig at Castaloy. They did this in 2018. No remains found. And then they did it in 2013 as well. So again, February 9th, we need closure. Interesting wording. I'm always very conscious of the communications between, those in the know with these articles. So we've got, the word escape. Someone pointed this out to me when I shared the article. Spy. My father was a spy. Hospitals doing wrong op. Hospitals were doing the wrong thing. Hospitals were very much involved with this experimentation. My father received a big award from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. My brother was witness to that. My father was a telecom technician, a secret ASIO operative. He was a line tapper for telecom, so he listened into people's phone calls. Why would he be getting an award from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital? I know why. And also the word well. So an imposter. As in the Castaloy dig, it's an imposter. That's what I read from that. So this is the article that came up on the 9th. They're talking about the Phipps connection, if there is one. Very interesting. They've got Nicole Kidman in the bottom, as I've spoken about. Some of the things that really need to be looked at here is that apparently it was the niece of the father of the children, Grant Beaumont, who asked for another investigation into Harry Phipps. Okay, so they're talking about nieces a lot in these cases, which is very interesting, or this latest foray for the Beaumont children. It was the niece of Grant Beaumont, the father, or Jim was his real name. I think he got called Jim, but his real name was Grant. So they're talking about the niece of Jim wanting an investigation into Phipps. Later on in this during the Castelloy dig, they mentioned a niece of Phipps was married to someone who was related to Jim Beaumont. Now, they didn't get together until many, many years after the children disappeared, so it's absolutely just erroneous that it was even mentioned. And that niece is absolutely furious that she was dragged through the paper. Obviously, both parents sadly died. Both Beaumont children parents died in recent years. On my birthday, interestingly, Mrs. Beaumont died in 2019, and Jim Beaumont died in 2023. There's part of the reason why they think Phipps might have been involved is because his son Hayden came forward saying he'd seen 3 children at the house soon after their disappearance, and then someone had to dig a hole. Now, in this, they are referring to a new investigation by the Hunters. Now, this is a group of men who were instrumental in having this dig at the 3rd dig at the Castelloy factory take place. They had a program that was to air on the 22nd of February, and all of this came out. The big dig happened just prior to that. Okay.
So who are they, the Hunters? Just a group?
So it's a retired detective called Bill Hayes, a guy called Stuart Mullins who's written quite a few books on the Beaumont children disappearance. They had a gentleman, a world-renowned expert in soil, in working out whether or not soil had been turned over. So that man's name is Marchie Hennenberg. I think Marchie's a really good man. I've met with him. He's a lovely guy, very, very kind. So I've got nothing against Marchie at all. But I just feel that this was very much about, and Frank Pangello, who's an MP here. I think it was about selling their program, to be honest. I don't think it was about trying to find the children.
Okay.
Mullins and Hayes know very well, they really don't like me, that I've produced a lot of evidence and put out vlogs, and I'm not liked, I can tell you. So in response to the 9th of February articles that they're going to do this dig again, obviously my brother Andrew is very distressed. Andrew McIntyre is my brother's name. He contacted me, we spoke about it, and we decided to start putting some posts out to try and get ahead of the news cycle. So this was one post that I put out on the 13th of February. So I'll just read it through quickly. So I was posting it on behalf of my brother. He's a recognised victim of childhood sex crimes. He had his abuser, Anthony Munro, convicted for 4.5 years in 2016. Andrew was also witness to the events on the day the deceased Beaumont children were brought to our Edwardstown home in the boot of a car, which is an event admitted by our father, Alan Maxwell McIntyre, in a 2015 video interview. And I've shared that many, many times. For those who've read Debbie Marshall's book, Banquet, on page 265, she admits that our father worked in the television industry at Channel 9 studios. So I've been alleging for years that he worked at Channel 9. I just didn't know that an investigative journalist had found evidence of it. And I've been alleging this because my father took me to Channel 9 studios as a small child, and I was raped and filmed there. Now, we were very close friends with the Kelvin family. So Rob Kelvin is a presenter for Channel 9. My cousin Penny Ann worked with Rob. One of them sold a house to the other in North Adelaide. Rob is Richard Kelvin's father. Richard Kelvin went missing. He was part of the family murders. He was murdered in the 80s, in 1984. Sorry, 1983. We used to go have family barbecues with the Kelvins, so it's a very connected thing. And I'll show some more evidence of that connection shortly. So on the same page that Debbie mentions that my father worked at Channel 9, she also says that my brother Andrew's abuser, Anthony Munro, filmed himself raping at least one of his victims. And that's very important to take into account, because there's child rape material, as well as children being trafficked for sex, as well as human experimentation going on in this Adelaide cult.
Yeah. That's kind of like the Epstein link, isn't it, as far as the filming stuff? But I was just going to say, is there any paper documentation of your father on the books at Channel 9, or was it off the books?
For her to have said, she's an investigative journalist. She must have some evidence to be able to say that. So she's not shown it to me, but there must be something. So in the book, unfortunately, Debbie states that Andrew's Beaumont allegations were unsubstantiated, but that's only because SAPOL won't look into it. And Andrew's allegations were actually substantiated by reams of evidence. And I just should mention too, Anthony Munro agreed to every single allegation made against him by Andrew when Andrew was having him investigated and then sentenced for child rape that he perpetrated against Andrew during the time that the Beaumont children went missing, by the way, over that period. Munro did not contest a single word in that 15-page statement. That's extremely unheard of. It's very, very rare. The reason for that is because Munro knew that Andrew was going to have him cross-examined about the Beaumont children in court. He wanted to avoid it, and so he just agreed to everything. And again, Andrew's allegations were also substantiated by the diary that placed Munro, our father, and other persons of interest on Glenelg Beach in the days and weeks leading up to the Beaumont abduction, including my abuser, my childhood abuser, JWB. And again, Andrew's allegations were vindicated in 2024 by a major crime detective who told him his allegations were 100% correct and accurate. So when I shared this information with my victim of crime lawyer and named the major crime detective, I was suddenly offered and paid compensation for the crimes my father perpetrated against me in childhood. So I'm now a registered victim of crime. I've been paid small amount of money.
So for people that don't, that's just happened this year, hasn't it? So you've just got
that was just last year. Last year.
Sorry, last year. Sorry, yeah.
So I told my lawyer on the 23rd of April about what my brother had told me about this major crime detective telling him what he told him. 29th of April, my lawyer wrote back to me to say it won't make any difference. 15th of May, I received an offer. Now, I had been waiting 5 years for any kind of offer. 5 years. Everything, all the medical documentation was all finished in 2019. That 15th of May letter that I received had been written on the 1st of May. So from the 29th, when my lawyer said it made no difference, 1st of May, Crown Solicitor makes me an offer. This was a big, big, big moment in this case. The fact that the papers keep saying SAPOL says there's no evidence is just rubbish, which is why I keep putting these blogs out and doing these interviews, because it's just absolute rubbish and they can keep reiterating the same lie, but it's very easy to prove them wrong. So I'm just going to quote my brother here. My brother, Andrew McIntyre. SAPOL now have the embarrassing task of working out how to fess up to the biggest cover-up of a crime against children the world has ever seen. The Oval abductions, which is Kirsty Gordon and Joanne Ratcliffe, and the family murders will follow a similar course. My siblings have written extensively on those murders. My father was the go-to man in all of these murders. He was South Australia's body boy. Everyone went to help for him with disposal of dead children and adults. So there were adults that we saw dismembered as well and buried and stuff. Everyone went to him for help. He proudly called himself a friend to police. More research needs to be done. Look at the large number of my family and friends that have been murdered since the 26th of January 1966. This fact alone is astonishing. And Andrew is actually also speaking about his own mother, who was murdered because of this case. I'm quoting Andrew again. SAPOL promotes false news. From day one of this case, they covered up the truth. Police were directing traffic away from our street while Max and my older sister Claire cleaned up the dead children. We refer to our father as Max. They were later taken to Stansbury to be buried with 3 wards of state who were also murdered. Tony Munro drove me over to Stansbury 2 days before the end of school holidays to show me where the children had been buried by Max, Tony, my grandfather and his friend. A large number of people were involved in this crime, which was overseen with full knowledge by SAPOL. All that happened was confirmed to me by an honest detective whose name I will not reveal at this stage because of what happened to ex-head of the Major Crime Department, Doug Barr, who was hung in his closet, which is a Masonic murder.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Can just tell me if I'm jumping too far forward, but it's because I watched your brother's short video today, and he was saying, what's the word you would say? Like, there's kind of like a conflict because you've suggested there that they were buried with 3 wards of state, and that connects to the Mulligan inquiry, which is under a suppression order. So is that a tactic they're going to try and use to keep it quiet if they did find them?
Well, with any luck, what I've prepared to show today might dissuade them from doing so, because I suspect once this is out there, that's going to be very difficult for them to continue to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this major crime detective told Andrew that the reason they haven't dug for the Beaumont children at Stansbury is because of the Mulligan inquiry suppression order. So that suppression order relates to state wards. The Beaumont children were not state wards. So that's the admission that there are state wards on that property. I saw a skull cave, a cave full of skulls. It had about I couldn't count at that time, but I estimate probably about 50 skulls that made up a small wall that my father forced me to go into as a small child, about 5. Um, you know, and I'm hoping and praying that's still there. So, that evidence is there. There's a lot of other evidence that needs to be.
But that's great. I hope people listen to that, because you're saying that they won't dig there because they know there's state ward kids
Yes,
buried there. So in other words, they know there's other children that
yes.
have been murdered, and they know where they are as well. But
There's another spot on the property that my father, when I was about 18, pointed to the ground and said, "Ha ha ha, better dig here when I die," and walked off. And at the time, I was still oblivious to, some of the abuse that had happened to me. Some of the I could never block out, but that was just like, what's he talking about? But I didn't forget. I remembered it. Um, Part of my MK Ultra programming was to remember everything. Um, so again, this just goes into, how the Mulligan inquiry doesn't relate to the Beaumont children, and I'm asking for the suppression order to be overturned. There is so much evidence pointing out that there's obviously so many links to my father being involved in this disappearance. And this is one of the most powerful, is that my father and his pedophile mates were visiting the beach, Glenelg Beach, in the days and weeks leading up to their disappearance. My father also worked at the telecom exchange, so he had a reason to be there that day. So, he would work public holidays, he would work weekends, he would get call-outs in the middle of the night. He was a line tapper. He would be sent out to listen to people's phone calls in the middle of the night. So this is a really important photograph. So the 2 people who signed off on the Mulligan inquiry were, and this is what I've been told by a researcher, John Howard and our ex-attorney of South Australia, Attorney General of South Australia, Michael Atkinson. Now, this is my first cousin on my father's side, Martin Hamilton Smith. This is his book, 7 Leaders in Camelot. He published this photograph. This is a photograph of him shaking the hand of Prime Minister John Howard at the time that John Howard was Prime Minister. Now, for those who are in the know about Masonic handshakes, there is something very significant about the hierarchy displayed with this photograph and the way that the hands are displayed. I'm not an expert on that, but I've been told that that is very significant.
I know with the photographs too, people have spoken about whoever takes the front hand position is the power. When that for the photo, that's the power position. They very deliberately put them in that. Yeah.
Look at that thumb. Look at Martin's thumb. Now, I've got nothing against Martin. I've never had a bad word to say about Martin. Not a problem with Martin at all. But he was the ex-head of the Liberal Party, and we were groomed as children to take up big positions, either academics. I was being groomed to be a psychologist. I've spoken about that. I was gifted a placement in the Flinders Bachelor of Science program, even though I had no way of getting in there, because my father made a phone call, and then when we went to enroll, he organised everything. And I've proven beyond any doubt with my academic transcripts that I had no right to have that. There's no way I should have got in. I had 13 points too low to get in, and no prerequisite studies to get into a Bachelor of Science. Just ridiculous. So, we're special. So this is my father's 2010 will, 2010 will. So in this will, he appoints Martin Hamilton Smith, his nephew, to be his trustee, and bequeaths all of his papers of research. Now, we still keep asking Martin, where are our father's papers of research? My father was meticulous in keeping his blackmail material, and we believe some of that could have been handed to Martin, very likely. So on the 25th of February, I felt this need to put it out there because I had a fairly strong sense they weren't having much luck with the Castelloy dig. The Castelloy dig lasted from one Saturday to the next. It ended, I think, on the around about the 28th. So they weren't having much luck. So I thought, okay, well, because they're not having any success in pinning this Beaumont case on Harry Phipps, they're going to go for Vaughan Einem again, and they keep doing this. They keep going from Phipps to Vaughan Einem to Phipps to Vaughan Einem. The only reason they think that Vaughan Einem might have been involved, Bevan Spencer Vaughan Einem might have been involved with this, is because of this photograph of this man who apparently was on a bridge, not on the beach, but he was close by to and watching a search for the Beaumont children shortly after they went missing. So I shared this information again on the 25th, trying to get ahead of them blaming Vaughan ITNJ again. The picture, and I'll show the evidence more closely, the picture of this man looks nothing like Vaughan ITNJ. So for those who are not aware, Bevan Spencer Vaughan ITNJ was convicted of Richard Kelvin's murder. I mentioned before, my family had very close ties with the Kelvins. I knew Richard. Unfortunately, I knew him during the time that he was missing also. Adelaide is known as the City of Corpses. This is Debbie Marshall's book that I mentioned earlier, where my father was named as being a member of Channel 9 Studios. She talks about the family murders. She talks about the chilling account beginning with the liberalisation of South Australia under the premiership of Don Dunstan, and she's demanding answers to decades-old questions. Who were the family killers? Why are suppression orders still protecting suspects 4 decades later? Why do some of these serial killings remain unsolved? And only one suspect of the 12 known suspects for the family murders has been convicted. And that's Bevan Spencer Vaughan ITNJ for Richard Kelvin's murder. And this again, I'll just read this. This is from Debbie Marshall's book. Alan Max McIntyre worked in the television industry at Channel 9 and died in June 2017. He was a close friend of Anthony Munro, a former scoutmaster convicted of multiple child sex offences in Australia and Cambodia. The only reason why he came back to Australia is because he was being hunted by vigilantes in Cambodia. Cambodia between 1965 and 1983. McIntyre's children, Ruth Collins and Andrew McIntyre, have each claimed, supposedly without substantiation, that their father and Munro were responsible for the murder and disappearance of the Beaumont children. So Munro lived in Siem Reap, Cambodia, where he owned a wine bar known for its extravagant drag shows and where he was under investigation for sexually abusing boys. He was sentenced to 10 years prison. Judge Paul Slattery said he violently and repeatedly abused boys when opportunity presented, even videotaping one of his acts. So that's very important to remember. He was videotaping. There are so many reports of people being used in child rape material in Adelaide, South Australia. So the family murders, for those who are not fully aware, series of 5 murders, but there were a whole series of kidnappings and sexual abuses of other children, teenage boys and young men as well. So between the ages of 14 and 25, Richard Kelvin was 14 when he disappeared. And between the 70s and 80s, I believe the family murders kept going.
Well, do you know the other weird correlation? Like, you called your father the Australian Epstein. Well, I think it was only last week, they've only just announced like the trailer for the new premiere of a new Charles Manson documentary. And it looks like this one is going to be the most informative. I mean, there's been a lot of books written about Manson, but that's the family as well too. And it's going to show that he was an intelligence asset as well, Manson. So I don't know if that's strange timing or just a synchronicity as well.
So when people refer to the family means the Illuminati across the world. Doesn't matter what country you're in. If you are part of these family lines, and I'll explain this in a moment, you are part of the family. And so you get away with things. It's also to do with Freemasonry as well and secret societies. So the reason I wanted to show this is because it shows the evidence that police believe that up to 12 people, several of them high-profile Australians, were involved in the kidnapping. So they know who they are, but they haven't done anything about them. Now, to a degree, I feel that there's always good cops that probably do want to investigate this. They're probably sick of having their names destroyed. We've had Patton in Victoria, the chief police, what do you call him, chief of police, can't renew his contract because 87% of the police force in Victoria have said get rid of him.
Yeah, it's amazing they even said that out loud. That's a kick in the guts. Yeah,
it's incredible. So I'm sure he'd love to renew his contract. I'm sure the government would love to renew his contract. He can't because 87% don't have any confidence in him, which is a really good sign because that means 13% are dodgy or just were too scared to speak up, but 87% were not. That's a really good sign. That means Victoria is probably going to be on the mend fairly soon. They'll put in another puppet, but if the police are already speaking up in the lower ranks, that's a really good sign. So again, no doubt, really good police officers in South Australia. I had dealings with some of them who want this out, but they can't because of these suppression orders and things that protect these people. And again, we have the horrible moniker of the murder capital of the world, the city of corpses. Adelaide is known to be this horrific place because of all these murders that never get solved. And quite frankly, if you see $1 million reward for anything in South Australia, number one, the reward does not exist. And secondly, that's their way of saying to one another in the Masonic family that it will never be solved.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes. They have absolutely no intention of going through with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So this is me. I'm roughly about 14. This is my sister Claire's wedding.
Oh,
This,
wow. Is that you at the front?
that's me at the front. My sister Claire was murdered in 2009. She supposedly hung herself. Her daughter also supposedly hung herself in December last year. Neither of them would have done that. Absolutely no way. This is Richard Kelvin's Aunt Carol. Carol and Claire owned a house and had a business together called Zebra Crossing in Port Adelaide. So they were very close. So this is the connection. So we knew the Kelvins. And for those who've been following me and who've been watching my posts, I often refer to or address the little black duck, and she is in this photograph. Okay, so this is the 26th of Feb. This is really interesting. So we've got at the bottom that, some people are curious about the dig site at Castleloy. What's very interesting about this for me, again, I see the comms in these papers, fat cat. So I've made allegations that I was raped and filmed by Humphrey Bear, someone in a Humphrey Bear suit, only the top half of the suit, at Channel 9 Studios when I was a toddler. Fat Cat, the person who played Fat Cat, also has been done for child sexual abuse. So I think this might be a nod to my allegation with this particular, could just be a coincidence, just seems like an odd one.
Pick up. Yeah, I do remember about Fat Cat. I remember
Yeah.
that coming out when I was young.
Yeah, so I mean, this is part of what they do with MK Ultra. They will have people parade around in, as clowns or, with puppets or as a puppet, in a suit to get the confidence of the children coming towards them, and then they'll abuse them. And it is one of the most horrific ways to completely demoralize and distress a child because they think that this is some sort of character that's safe. I used to love watching Humphrey until I was abused. And again, my cousin was the producer for the Humphrey Bear show, so we had connections there. So here they're saying no stone will be left unturned. This is the same paper as this is the inside, so pages 4 and 5. There is a stone that marks the sinkhole at Stansbury. It always amuses me when they talk about the stone not being no stone being left unturned. That stone marks the spot where the sinkhole is. Now it's sort of talking about the situation. Again, they did this dig, nothing was found. They overturned mountains of dirt. With excavators, nobody was wearing forensic gear. They knew they weren't going to find the children there. The 2018 dig, they also didn't wear forensic gear. Again, it's not forensically done. It's done with a freaking bulldozer.
So with this particular dig site, what's the tip-offs of why they continually digging there? Who's given them that?
So a young man called Hayden Phipps, who's sadly passed, he said that he saw 3 children at Phipps' house. And then some people said they had to dig a hole within a few days of the children disappearing. And it was a very deep, big hole, apparently, that would have fit 3 children in it. Now, every time they've dug at the Castleloy dig, they've found cow bones and horse bones, animal bones, but they haven't found anything else. So the reason I wanted to show this, my brother, Andrew, despite this being absolutely just horrific for him to have to go through this again, now, bearing in mind 2013, 2018, 2025, this is the 3rd time they've dug the same spot, ignoring Stansbury. Andrew got the wherewithal to go down and speak to the people outside the Castleloy dig because he's a bloody hero. And so basically, as it progressed, my brother went down there. He talked about our father and convicted pedophile Anthony Munro, who's obviously Andrew's abuser, and that they were involved in the Beaumont disappearance. And he said, and again, they say police have previously said there's no evidence, rah, rah, rah. And Andrew said, the current excavation is hopeless. They're not here. They're in Stansbury at the bottom of a well. Okay, so Andrew was shown the well site, and he spoke about that in that quick video. I don't want to repeat him and say the wrong thing by
So he's
accident.
gone to this dig site, actually confronted them.
Yes,
At
yes,
wow.
yes. Yeah. Andrew's pretty tough. He's pretty
Yeah.
tough. This has taken a huge toll on him, but he still does what he needs to do. He's finally being treated like a spectator. Some people were furious about that when I shared that. He's not a spectator. He's a witness. He's the witness. Besides my sister Ruth. So I just wanted to point this out because I find this amusing personally as a professional psychic, and I've been a professional psychic for 21 years. Again, talking about, what Andrew has spoken about, that Munro was involved. And then they put this little bit at the bottom about other theories. So apparently Jim and Nancy received a tsunami of reports and claims, much of it grounded in fantasy. One stranger claimed the children were being held by Christian brothers in a secret room under Sacred Heart College. Well, my father had a secret room under his house. So I do wonder if this person got some information and it got sort of, we'll look over here. There was a Dutch clairvoyant called Gerard Crosset who claimed the siblings were buried under a warehouse. Now, his first thing was he said they're in a brick kiln. My father had a brick kiln under his house, so he was pretty close.
It's pretty
He
accurate,
just
yeah.
had the wrong location.
Yeah.
So others to offer their dubious expertise included a water diviner, ghost whisperers, and some other guy. It's just like, oh, the psychics, we don't want to listen to the psychics.
Do you think that's a bit of a dig at you?
I did take it that way. I was quite proud of it, quite frankly, because I didn't think my name would ever get in the paper. This is my only way of saying, yeah, they've actually finally linked me to this officially.
I was, like with like example with the Pizzagate reports and stuff like that. I was listening to one yesterday, and they're talking about, because they'll make a false claim. They're like, Hillary Clinton is running a worldwide international child trafficking operation from a pizza shop. So they put out the false claim, and then they debunk their own. The media puts out their false claim and then debunks their own false claim.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
yeah, but
It's ridiculous. Yeah. So again, I mentioned that I put that that post up to get ahead of them blaming Von Einem again, and then they've got him in there. So the next day they literally bring out the Von Einem thing again. So I got ahead of them by one day. I was pretty proud of that.
Well done.
So this is why it's not Von Einem. So this guy, I've been told his name is Brian Medlin. He's featured with John Pike. John Pike is a very close friend of my father, and he's doing 18 years for child rape, like over 100 counts of child rape. Philip, this little boy that he's got his hands all over, died very young. Okay. This is Von Einem. This is the man on not on the beach, but on the bridge, but he was watching the search. Now, Mike Smithson keeps dragging this out. So this is a 2021 article. They've dragged it out again on the 26th of February in the Advertiser again. It is not Von Einem. And he says, Mike Smithson says here, he has a burning desire to resolve the identity of this person in this footage. So please let Mike Smithson know. I put this out in 2022 in a vlog on my BitChute and Rumble channels. Please let him know. It's just so infuriating that they keep doing this. So this is the one from the article, from this photograph that's, oh my God, it's Von Einem. No, it's not. It's this guy and that photograph of him with Pike was taken with Anthony Munro's camera. So no, I'm not saying this man's a pedophile. Absolutely not saying that. It's just that he happened to be with John Pike, taken by Anthony Munro's camera. Both of them are now convicted pedophiles. Anthony Munro's been convicted 3 times of child rape offences. So in 2009, so Smithson's had this theory. In 2009, it was even debunked by a forensic facial mapping expert called Kenneth Ling. Okay, and he was emphatic in his findings, despite the sort of similarity. There's some really important differences. So it's not him. It's not Von Einem. Okay. This is what Von Einem looked like when that photograph was taken. So he didn't even look like the guy, and he doesn't wear glasses. At this time, he wasn't wearing glasses. So they've basically just let's blame everything on Von Einem. I'm surprised they haven't tried to blame the oval abductions on Von Einem, quite frankly. It's not him. I mean, the jawline, it's completely different. So that's my rant on that. So finally, on the 27th, they finally relented and started to say in the paper that, okay, Stansbury's an option. Now, the reason they did that, there was some beautiful women who went down outside the Castelloy dig and had a sign, dig up Stansbury. They got abused by one of the people who was involved with this Castelloy dig, like yelled at, and they were young women, so that's not a very nice thing to do. So finally, so Cozzy, Andrew Costello, he runs a television program, South Aussie with Cozzy. He apparently has had an interest in this case for a very long time. He really was hoping that they'd find them at the Castelloy dig. Then he pointed out that he's known for a long time about the Stansbury property. I've spoken with Cozzy. Seems like a nice guy. He mentioned that he'd seen, the allegations that I've made in many interviews. He's seen some of that. He's seen what Andrew's put out there. So he thinks it's definitely worth having a look at. So again, it's based on my brother Andrew's claims. Now, this is the 28th of Feb. Okay, so this is them sort of talking about it maybe on the 27th, 28th, the dig's almost over, or the dig's pretty much done. I think they had one more day at the dig and they gave up. So this is it. We're going to go and look at Stansbury. It's gone quiet since then, apart from a couple of little reports that have come back to me. It's not in the paper at the moment. The reason I'm sharing this is because of the connection to Epstein, which I'm going to explain later, as we've just been mentioning.
Yeah,
I first publicly mentioned that I believe that my father was Australia's Epstein in 2020 in an interview with Shaun Attwood. So they're finally sort of, relenting. So first time my name's ever turned up in any kind of mainstream paper. So Andrew Cozzy.
How did that feel to see your name in the mainstream?
Well, I was shocked. I didn't think it would ever happen because I've spoken about ritual abuse publicly, and that's extremely rare. Usually the mainstream media just treats you like rubbish, like dirt, or they'll never mention you at all. So I was very surprised.
It's very risky in the mainstream media, even just to put your name, because automatically you're going to have a number of people that are going to Google Rachel Vaughan or YouTube Rachel Vaughan, and they're going to come across all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's very big. They put your name in there and your brothers as well. Yeah.
It is big, and it's very surprising. And again, I'm now a registered victim of crime. I have been since last year. So if they want to smear me, that will be a problem for them. I'm sitting on a gold mine right now because if they smear me, I will sue. And then technically, journalists have to ask your permission to put your name in anything.
Well, isn't that amazing timing too? That just happened last year, and then all this is coming out now.
Everything happens when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah. Anyway,
so I need that protection. Yeah. So he's doubled down because he wants to dig at Stansbury, as he pointed out, and he takes a quick Google search to find a lot of evidence that points towards Stansbury. So thank you, Cozzy, for saying that, because there's always the usual thing that's trammed out. There's no evidence, and the police say there's no evidence. So obviously, Andrew and I have long said that our father was involved in this case. So it's possible that the Beaumont children could have been buried in a sinkhole on private property in Stansbury. So again, also my full brother, Danny, and my full sister Simone were also mentioned. Andrew and I are half brother and sister. Simone and Danny are my full brothers and sister. Okay. So what needs to be taken into account here? We've got an Epstein article directly underneath. We've got Jackie Epstein writing the article down the side. It's talking about a radio host being axed. I have made allegations about a radio host raping me at Channel 9 studios just before I was raped by the man in the half Humphrey suit. When I was raped by the radio jock, who's now dead, I wasn't filmed. With the Humphrey one, I was filmed, and I was told at 18 by somebody who had just seen photographs of me as a small child that he had seen a video of a little girl being raped by someone in a Humphrey suit, some sick sex film, he said, and he said it looked just like you. And I, at the time, couldn't deal with it. I just could not deal with it. And this is the first time as well they've actually shown the sinkhole. And if it was a better photo, you'd be able to see the rock that they keep talking about, no stone unturned. There's a rock there that marks it, that our father put there, that has a fake humanoid face on it.
So this was this was February 28th,
28th.
and it's now March the 8th today, so about a week ago.
So double Epstein reference, which is very interesting. So this is the digital paper version of that. And then we've got these other things that come up at the same time. So again, one of the things that's written in this article is axed. Now, my father used to use an axe with the things that he used to do. Again, now we're talking about Hackman, Gene Hackman, axe. So, you know, mummified bodies. My father kept treasures. He mummified things. So when he died in 2017, that night, my brother, who owns the Stansbury property, burnt things in the middle of the night, like 1 o'clock in the morning. He was burning fires, small spot fires all around the property. And the people who were witness to that said it smelled like burning hair and flesh. So he was taking my father's treasures and he was burning them. And I don't blame him, but that's evidence, you know, you can't do that. And in the same digital paper, we've got horror stories about to blast $1 billion hole in SA's economy. Now, they're talking about it being the drought. Interestingly, all the photographs they show of this drought, there's a lot of greenery around. It's kind of confusing. So, you know, is it comms? I don't know, but I find it very interesting that it happened to be there.
Weird word choice anyway, isn't it, too? You wouldn't put that for drought. It's a bit...
No, it's very strange. So this is the 1st of March, 2025. So the digital paper's saying that the local York Peninsula town want the rumours put to rest that the Beaumont children are buried there. But if you actually get the paper version, you'll find that no, this gentleman's talking about the people being fascinated by the possibility that they're there. There's no one saying, oh my God, no, has to be put to rest. No, they want to know if their children are there. Now, this is Harry Phipps, and on the left is the identikit of the man seen with the children, the Beaumont children, on the day they went missing. Now, in the book by Mullins, Unmasking the Killer of the Beaumont Children, Harry Phipps' face is quite elongated in the picture. Now, I can't say for certain they did that on purpose, but this is the actual photograph of Phipps from the internet, and you can see he's got a very, very round face, very different hairline. He's got quite a distinct widow's peak. Eyes are much further apart. Ears are different. He doesn't look anything like the identikit. On the other hand, my father looks a lot like the identikit. My father had a long, thin face. He had that hairline. This is what he looked around that time. So I think that's far more likely that my father was the one that was seen with the children on the beach.
So when's the artistic impression drawing? When's that from?
That would have been very close to when the children went missing. I'm not sure of the exact date, but it was obviously an eyewitness had seen the children with this man, and then they'd done the identikit. There is a towel and shoes that were worn. Andrew's holding up a photograph of Claire shortly after the children went missing, and we believe that's the towel from the Beaumont children. And he has a whole reasoning, a rationale around that, and I'll let him explain that so I don't get that wrong. This is Claire wearing those shoes. They're the same shoes. So, popular shoe at the time, perhaps. I remember finding just one of those shoes in the shed at Macklin Street and always wondering where the other one was. He kept things.
Oh, was that, yeah, because you said like your dad would keep trophies.
Yeah, he kept treasures and trophies. Now, the person that was seen with the children on the beach on the day they went missing was wearing a specific pair of bathers with a white lace up at the front. These are exactly the same bathers. That is my father. These are his friends. This is my brother, Andrew. Andrew's always holding up fish in these photos. This is Alan Knight. This is another guy called Colin. So they all used to wear each other's clothes. So either my father got hold of that man's bathers, or that man's wearing my father's bathers, or they just both happen to have a pair of the same bathers. It's just, what are the chances that we've got a photograph that our father's in it? He used to wear, they all used to wear the same clothes, they'd all wear each other's wetsuits. Those bathers are significant in this case. And again, the diary that puts, my father, these people, persons of interest, including one that I saw murder a child, I was in a boat with JWB and my father. They had forced me to choose a child from what I assume was the Goodwood Orphanage. I remember the quadrangle had all these red bricks. We took him out in the boat. He went into the cabin with them. There was a lot of horrible noises made, and he came out dead. And then JWB fed this little boy's body to a shark that they'd been burling up the water. And my father was a shark fisherman. He used to go out with Valerie Taylor. She was really well known for being a shark fisherwoman. I think I've got her name right. So they were going to the beach, in the lead up. And there's also my father's admission. He said it on camera in 2015 and it aired in 2017 that Anthony Munro brought the deceased Beaumont children to our Macklin Street Edwardstown home in the boot of a car on the day they went missing. He has said this on camera. So, I mean, how much evidence do people need?
Like, just if people go watch this bit. How long did he die after that video?
So this aired, I think it was he died on the 13th. And this aired within a week. It might have even been just a few days afterwards.
Because I was talking to a police officer about the deathbed confession, and they said that's one of the most solid bits of evidence you can have.
Now, I managed to get a really good member of parliament, who's now a senator, to force an investigation into my father. So she wrote the letter to the commissioner and the police minister at that time, who is now our premier. And my father started to have that investigation happen on the 1st of May, 2017. He was dead by the 13th of June.
Cool.
Pretty close. It's within 6 weeks.
You got the 1st of May again, and then you said that was the same time you got the letter, was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
1st of May is, what do they call it in the satanic calendar?
Beltane.
What is it?
Beltane.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So these dates are all really important to these people. Numbers are really important to Satanists and cult members and family members. Locations, symbols are and I'll show more of that in a minute. So this is the current petition to have the children at Stansbury dug up. 37,381 people last check. This petition that's closed in 2015 was enough to have the second Castelloy dig exhumed. That community pressure, apparently 2,360 people on that one. So we've got way more than
times more. Yeah.
And we can't read the comments, unfortunately, on this petition anymore. But when you did, when you were able to read them, and most people who signed commented, it was all say polls this, they're corrupt. Why aren't they doing this? It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why it's not being done. This is ridiculous. We need closure. Now you can't read the comments, unfortunately. I do have documents where I did copy a lot of the comments because it was so heartening to me at the time, and I was being so harassed by trolls at the time. I needed to read the comments. Now, the author of the Facebook site Unmasking the Killer of the Beaumont Children has said to someone on his site that he has had brief dealings with myself and my brother, Andrew McIntyre, and quickly found our information changed and brief correspondence was all over the place mixing stories. I have never, ever corresponded with this individual, and neither has Andrew. This is an outright lie. I don't know who he's communicating with, but it ain't me. It's not Andrew. Now, I thought you might find this really interesting. So this is who they get to sell their book.
Yeah.
A pedophile. Oh, sorry, alleged pedophile. Now, so, okay, you using an alleged pedophile to sell a book about an alleged pedophile. Great. But then this came out yesterday. He's got fresh charges.
Oh, this is new, is it?
It is new. I couldn't believe it because we'd already organised to do this, and I thought, wow, that's timing. An 11th victim, 11th hour, 11th victim. Interesting.
Oh, I so hope there's justice before he passes away.
This is not about some young man. It's the child abuse squad. People keep saying, oh, he was molesting men. No, it was children. Child abuse squad does not look after or take consideration of people who are adults. This is the child abuse squad.
They kept saying that in the media. They would only identify this one driver or whatever that he was abusing, but then saying the child abuse squad's in there. Like, what?
It's just infuriating. God, okay. It's just so obvious, but people just like, oh no, he's good. He's this, he's that. I'm not going to read this out, but if people want to read this, they can pause the film and then read it themselves. It's written by Judith Beaumont, addressed to Mullins about the book Unmasking the Killer of the Beaumont Children. Is she related to the Beaumonts? I don't know, but this is scathing. It is truly scathing.
Oh, so that's written on the like Amazon or something,
Yeah,
is it? As a book
as a review.
and she's given it a 1 star. I can see.
Furious. This is a furious review. This was the placard held up outside the Castelloy dig by the two young women who were then absolutely abused by one of the people involved in the dig, which is totally appropriate. Yeah, good on them, sweethearts. So for those who find it difficult to believe that we have a cult running South Australia, the Satanic Temple has an Australian site, and so does Adelaide. Now, this used to be up on the Satanic Temple site. They've taken it down. It's obviously a bit too much heat because it keeps being bandied around. For those who also still find this difficult to believe, this is a 1991 Canberra Times article where they name 14 New South Wales towns. Now, interestingly, we have a cyclone coming into Lismore, which is named as one of those towns, and that cyclone is making it impossible for our Prime Minister to call an election. Interesting timing.
Yeah, I know.
Interesting timing.
Well, it's not just, it's Murwillumbah, which is Murwillumbah's just near Lismore as well. It's like the next, yeah, very close.
And the number of people who've contacted me who've been abused in these towns is just astronomical. I can't keep up with the number of people who come to me and say, I was abused here, and I send them this article because it's proof for them, and they're just overjoyed to know that there's some proof.
Well, I was a couple of months ago, I'd just been going through so many of these missing people's cases in Byron Bay. I mean, it's close to that area, but there's something around
67. Yeah.
Well, there's one, I don't know if you've seen it. They found his van with his phone still in his van. His body was found 300 meters from the van months and months later, and the head was decapitated, and the police said it was a kangaroo must have ripped the body, decomposed, and ripped the head off. Like, there's clear cover-ups going on there too.
And wasn't there a knife in the heart or something? There was something else.
Oh yeah, that was his official death, was suicide by stabbing to the heart. And there was another Belgian boy recently that they've never found. They found his hat, and they've got some GPS data, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just horrific.
But yeah. Anyway,
so for those who again might find this all very difficult to understand why these allegations are not being looked into, this is my great-grandfather, Joseph Wright. He was the secretary of the Sons of Temperance Lodge. He's a very, very high up Freemason, considered a master builder and grand president of the Grand Lodge. And Mrs. J.D. McIntyre was my grandmother, his daughter.
And haven't you told me before that Wright means Mason?
It does.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So Wright means Mason, and McIntyre means son of a Mason.
Yeah, wow.
Very significant to the Stansbury property. So this is the same obituary. So that shows the date. So this was in 1940. My father was born in 1929. So this means that he had 11 years of knowing this man as his grandfather, which might explain some of the things that he did. Because as I said, he had alters. People with alters have had some sort of horrific trauma. I would just wanted to clarify, so Master Mason's the highest rank that anybody can have, and Master Builder is a secret right of Scottish Masonry, McIntyre Wright Scottish. The Grand President is equivalent to Grand Master, very, very high level in Freemasonry. And also I've put in here, I wanted to point out that one of the common Masonic murders is to hang a person. There's a case of Roberto Calvi that's really famous and really old case where they know that he was murdered by Masons. And there's also, there's the resurrection story of Haram Biff, who's, Masonic, all their whole order is sort of based around this guy that was, Haram Biff. So there are all these very interesting ways that Masons will, if you break an oath, you will expect to be killed in a certain way. And I've got the Illuminati bloodline there thing first. I'll show you one.
Book, that Fritz Springmeier one.
Yeah. So the black and white checkerboard on the South Australian Police hat. This is a very old hat. This is going back to probably the 60s. This is the current hat. This is our current police chief. This is the Masonic checkerboard. This is all about symbols. My my grandfather was descended from a Catherine Kennedy, so that's the Illuminati connection. My grandmother, Laurel, Mrs. J.D. McIntyre, Laurel Wright, is from. So my grandfather's connection is Kennedy. My grandmother's connection is Wright, which is that Grandmaster. So we're talking about a pedigree here, which I am not proud of at all. Whenever I mention this, people say, "Oh, she's so proud." I'm not. It's disgusting. I've absolutely come into this family to destroy this and to expose it.
What era was that Catherine Kennedy? When does that date back to?
So their son was born 1801. So we're looking, it's back away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you've got your Kennedy bloodline, one of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines. So when you've got rank, because of these bloodline connections, you would shake the hand, say, of a prime minister and be the person that's in control, if that makes sense. This is my grandmother, so she was very active in government circles. So again, her father was right. She had an Order of Australia medal. Not everybody who has an Order of Australia medal is a bad person, but OBEs, OAMs, you've got to wonder, are they in the club? So Andrew and I both gave testimony to what we went through, and not all of it, but some of it, to the ITNJ in 2018. So this information's been out for a long time. So we're talking, nearly 7 years that we've been talking about this publicly. I put out my evidence, which you helped me do, with your interviews as well, regarding the Edwardstown tunnels, 2021, 2023. I put out a PDF of evidence. This is what the brick kiln underneath my childhood home looks like. It has concrete up the sides and on the base. You cannot have that in a brick kiln. That means it's been converted into a bunker. During the 1938 mandate here in South Australia, we had a mandate that every house, meeting place and business had to have a bunker, tunnel or trench, because they expected the Japanese to moor their warship Tokyo Rose off Kangaroo Island, where there's very deep water, and fly their fighter jets up, or whatever their airplanes were called at that time, up South Road. So all along South Road, all of these shelters and tunnels were built all along South Road. So South Road goes almost all the way to Cape Jervis. It's very, very long. It goes all the way from, I think it's Torrens to Darlington. So during the time, so in 2012, I told major crime detectives that I witnessed a murder in the hidden cellar below my family home, where I grew up in Macklin Street Edwardstown. I told them that there was a tunnel that led to ballast tanks. My father was obsessed with ships. And then between the ballast tanks, there was another little tunnel that went to this brick kiln. And then from the brick kiln, there was a tunnel that went to other bunkers in the area and to the Glandore Boys Home. I told them this in 2012. I was denigrated and told I was crazy. And then, and this is where some of the bunker places are located, then they started to do this upgrade of South Road. So I had spoken to the major crime detectives about these bunkers. They knew that there were bunkers all along those in that section. The South Road section, because they expected the Japanese to fly their planes along there, they expected that area to be bombed. So that's where most of the big bunkers were built. Type 5 shelters, according to Wimmer, who wrote his thesis on the subject called Gimme Shelter. So if you want to look up Wimmer's thesis, it's brilliant, Gimme Shelter. And it talks about all the different kinds of bunkers, but the type 5 ones were all along South Road. And again, South Road's very long. So we have known tunnels in this location where the Repat Hospital is in Door Park. There's one along Winston Avenue that a man told me he was instrumental in excavating, that he could walk through. It was big enough for him to walk through. There are the ones along in this particular area, many documents proving there are tunnels in this location. This is Macklin Street where the bunker was. There's tunnels there. This is where the Bundelix factory was, where all of the brick kilns and terracotta tile kilns were built at a lower level, because as they excavated the clay, they built all the kilns at a lower level, and then they brought fill in later and covered them all up. There is Penong Avenue. There's a really big opening there at 57, I think it is. There's a huge opening at Morfettville. Both of those you could drive a car through. There's some more in Glandore. That's the Glandore Boys Home. So there's tunnels leading from Macklin Street to there, not very far away. So, they're everywhere. There's so many that I couldn't mention the location of because I didn't want to get done, for, libel or whatever. So that Darlington upgrade project, so this upgrade of South Road has got started in 2016. Now.
And you said they've redone like Glandore as well, haven't they?
Yeah. Oh, they're fully doing it. Yeah, they're fully doing it. So Stephen Mulligan is the son of Ted Mulligan, Edward Mulligan, QC. Edward Mulligan oversaw the Mulligan inquiry. So Stephen Mulligan was the Minister for Planning and Transport and Infrastructure during the time that this upgrade was announced. I'm not saying anything against Stephen at all. I'm just saying what are the chances that the Mulligan inquiry suppression order comes in, the inquiry happens in the first place, the thousands of allegations are squashed under a suppression order, and suddenly they start upgrading this road to take away all the evidence of the bunkers and tunnels in that area. And again, there's Ted Mulligan's name, Edward Mulligan, and you can see.
So he's the son, is that right?
Yeah. So he's now the treasurer in South Australia. I'm not saying anything against him. I'm just saying, isn't that an unusual?
It's worth noting.
It's worth noting. So this is part of that upgrade that started in 2016. Now, just across from this section is a winery, or was a winery, called the Hamilton Winery. People just need to keep that in mind. In, what date was this? 9th of May 2019. During the upgrade, there was a blowout. So a rainwater drain or natural water course not identified during planning was blamed for both these collapses, okay? There were errors in the water course mapping. This was not natural. This is man-made tunnels. The tunnels in the area are extensive and they're not mapped intentionally because nefarious things happen through them, like the ones in Edwardstown and Glandore and surrounds where I was being trafficked as a child. So Stephen Knoll was forced to try and explain it, and he said there was an embankment between Sturt Road and Flinders Drive, which was under threat. The long west-facing slope, which accommodates most of the Flinders University campus and its sporting oval. So it was a significant area, and again, across from a winery that I mentioned the name of before. And they were not sure if it was human-made drainage. Okay, so here, he says he doesn't know how the hell it happened in the first place. Well, I can tell him, when I was doing my Edwardstown tunnel research, I was told by the council that the tunnels that I was trafficked through did not exist. And yet, every single main road and every single side street, every main road in Australia has a telecom tunnel underneath either the road or under the footpath. Every single main road has a telecom tunnel. The council knew that. I was trafficked through tunnels that were walkable. And so, I just met so much resistance. So there are tunnels, like I said, in Australia under every main road, under the footpath of every main road. And most of the water tunnels that I was trafficked through were not on the water node maps that are the government maps. Even though you'd walk down the street and see that's where the drainage hole is in the road, it wasn't on the government maps in the area where I grew up. There's also subsidence in areas like along Almond Grove between Crossroad and the Glandore Boys Home, which was fairly obvious that the tunnel led from the telecom tunnels, Telstra tunnels ran from Crossroad, where they're really obvious, underground all the way to Naldera Street, just opposite the Glandore Boys Home. And they had to have run through Almond Grove because you can see the plates at either end, but there's no point along there that you can see where they actually are, apart from subsidence, where the actual footpath is actually collapsing. And there was lots of areas like on Towers Terrace where the footpath was collapsing because of these hidden tunnels. So again, this Darlington upgrade is also part of the North-South Corridor upgrade. Now, the north-south corridor upgrade goes past Glandore and Edwardstown. These are the Telstra plates. There's something there that shows you the size. It's like a coffee cup. These are wide. They're about 6 foot deep. Here's a picture of what they look like when you're in them, and they go for miles. Some of them are blocked at either end of those pits where the plates are, but many are not, and you can walk for miles, literally. My father was working at the telecom exchange in Glenelg at the time that the children went missing, so people need to keep that in mind. He wrote a letter to my mother in 2009 asking for an alibi for the day the children went missing. So he has no alibi because she knows she was not with him. He asked her for an alibi. We've got that letter, so he has no alibi. So we have 12th of September, 14th of September 2022. So this is this chaotic, they're compulsorily acquiring these houses. Now, the ones that they're acquiring, very interestingly, and by the way, Tom Koutsantonis, an MP, came into power, and then he changed the design for this. So this is in 2022. This is after my allegations were aired publicly about these tunnels. And sorry it's so fuzzy, but in this particular article, there are submissions asking why character homes were being selected for demolition. These are National Trust homes, while non-heritage properties such as the Telstra Exchange at Glandore were being kept. Now, the reason why the character homes were being destroyed is because they're the ones with the access to tunnels and bunkers, because they were around during the 1938 mandate where people had to produce these tunnels and bunkers.
And that's complete contradiction than you see anywhere. They do
Exactly.
I know people have had to change parts of their home. You can't do anything that's heritage listed.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So yeah, I've talked about the Glandore Boys Home tunnels, the hull of the Fitzjames, the Hulk is under the grounds there, and I've explained all of that in this if people are interested in that. A cardinal that's died recently, an Australian cardinal, accessed those boys at that boys' home. That needs to be taken into account. This was part of the Child Abuse Royal Commission. This happened in 2012, and part of that, this gentleman called John Simmons, who used to be at the Glandore Boys Home, said the following: "Think about your worst nightmare and then double it. Now, I suffered that from 6 or 7 years old until I was 18 years old, and they could not give a stuff." He's talking about the people he was trying to tell. "There's not much being said about Glandore, but let me tell you now, that place is a den of pedophiles, absolute den of pedophiles. I'm not talking about one person. I'm talking about half a dozen people." So they're the half a dozen that abused him. This is an excerpt from, I think it's one of the government websites. So 19 men were alleging having abused. Now, they were boys at the time, just keep that in mind. They often use this sort of language to make you think, oh, they must have been adults. They were 19 boys who grew up to be men to make these allegations. And the allegations were, that between 6 and 13 they were being abused, horrific, obvious rapes, and also photography of sexual acts. So again, this is a couple of streets from where I grew up. My father was producing child rape material in the underground aspect of the house I grew up on, Macklin Street. 2 streets away, we've got the Glandore Boys Home, where people are alleging the same thing. Child rape material being procured. I just wanted to put this into place. So I shared this, I haven't got a date. Anyway, I put this up a while ago, and it's talking about, May 24, about the golfing term to have a mulligan. So in golf, if you're having a mulligan, you're just wiping the slate clean and starting again. Now, Satanists use names, they use words, they do these things. They have particular names that they use for things. So the mulligan inquiry could be in relation to that golfing term, a way that they took all of the allegations,
Yeah.
they put the suppression order on, and they wiped it clean. And that play on words is very important. And my brother also alleged that he used to have to go to the main Freemason Lodge on North Terrace, and he'd be drugged each time, and he would see people being played with children, obviously being played within those locations. So this suppression order has to go. Andrew and I are just 2 people who've made a lot of noise about this. There are thousands and thousands of people who made allegations and submissions to that inquiry. So this brings me to one of my father's other very close friends. So we've already heard about Anthony Munro, thrice convicted pedophile, very close friend of my father. John Pike, 18 years serving at the moment for child rape, hundreds, like over 100 counts of child rape. Very close friend of my father. And this is my father's third convicted pedophile friend called Graham Bennett Fraser. So this article, written by Nigel Hunt, very interesting because Nigel Hunt was the only one who was ever allowed to report on the Beaumont children case for a very long time. So the Police Complaints Authority, I had a lot of dealings with the Police Complaints Authority. I always got the same response, and it's very similar to what this response is here. Now, it's very interesting. This is November 2009. The Police Complaints Authority was disbanded because of corruption in 2009. So it must have happened very shortly after this. So this Graham Bennett Fraser, he was a chief inspector of police at the time, was abusing two young girls in the 80s, the same time he was abusing myself and missing child Tracey Louise Bell. Most people don't know her real name was Tracey. During the 80s, the commissioner at that time was David Hunt. We've got Nigel Hunt reporting on it. Interesting. Very interesting. Also, Fraser had... he was living in York Peninsula in Millerton for quite a while. Millerton and Stansbury are neighbouring towns. So that's another connection that he had to my father in proximity. But in its findings, the Police Complaints Authority, which, by the way, again, was disbanded because of corruption, commented that although a different outcome was likely for the matter if it arose today, in the context of 23 years ago, the disciplinary proceedings in that time were okay. So what happened was this chief inspector of police was abusing these young girls. It was found out, and all he got was a demotion. He went from chief inspector to inspector. Now, here he is. Now, I put this up because I wanted to point out he lived on the York Peninsula in Millerton. Okay. It says here that the girls were teenagers when they were being abused. They were abused over a long period of time. Actually, one of them was only 9 when it started. So that's important because I was 9 when he was abusing me and Tracey Louise Bell was 10. That's significant. This is Tracey Louise Bell. Now, the photograph they always air of her is this very much younger child. In 2012, when I made my allegations to police, I mentioned that her hair was completely different. She looked a lot older. She had a flicked fringe style. Her hair was shorter and it was bleached on top. And then they aired this to discredit me so that I wouldn't have that very important evidence that she looked very different when my father was abusing her and she was being kept underneath the Macklin Street property as a captive. During the time that she was under the house, Richard Kelvin was brought in. So she went missing in January. He went missing in June. We were filmed with Richard during that time. Graham Bennett Fraser, who abused her and myself, also helped bring Richard in because Richard was so drugged or drunk or whatever, he couldn't walk. Those two children missing from the same state within 6 months of each other, they have never, ever in the mainstream media been connected. And it's just ridiculous. And again, it's this cover up. And they didn't want her found. Number one, they didn't use her first real name in any of the reports. And secondly, they had a picture of her at least 3 years younger. I'm sure her parents would have had, well, they had this footage. They never aired this. So,
Interesting. I would never know that stuff, like the rules, the small and subtle, but like important tactics they use, like just by selecting a certain picture
yep,
to discredit your statement, all that kind of stuff.
And her friend that approached me and told me that I was right about her first name being Tracey, because my father told me her first name was Tracey. And when I told the major crime detective that in 2012, he nearly fell off his chair. But then he still went after Dita Fennick for her death, for her murder.
So what was she referred to in the media then if they didn't call her Tracey?
Louise Bell.
That's right, yeah.
So when my friend, who was her childhood friend, heard these reports, she didn't recognise her.
Yeah.
And she didn't recognise the name. And I get really emotional about this. So I'm probably sounding really angry. So I'm not angry at you. Just for context, after she went missing, her earrings were left on the corner of Doctors Road and South Road. This is South Road. This is very significant. My father had a way of connecting names with things. So I was actually taken to this location as a 14-year-old for a bizarre ritual where I was met with my twin. And in MK Ultra, they do twinning programming. This poor girl and I, we were the same age. We did not look the least bit alike. She had been told that she was my twin. I'd been told that she was that I was her twin. We were so confused, and we're both asking each other, what on earth is all this about? So I went to that So that's a ritual location when I was 14. But my father, so that my father was pointing the location out. But my father, I assume it was my father, left the earrings under a rock. It was phoned in so that they would find them. Now, the juxtaposition is Maxwell, my father's name, Maxwell Graham. So he used this location for a reason. Doctors Road is very significant, and you can't see it here, but there's Huntingdale Creek. I don't know if that was called Huntingdale Creek at that time, but this area here is called Hackham, which is why I pointed out Hackman, Hackham, Axe. That's significant to what my father used to do. This is McIntyre Place in Stansbury. If you look at this, it creates a 5-pointed star.
Yeah.
It's number 18. McIntyre means son of a mason. Now, that road was called Cutline Road, Government Road, Adelaide Road, and now McIntyre Place. They did the same thing with the Macklin Street property. It used to be number 2. Now it's a different number. So they try and cover it up. When you search 18 McIntyre Place now, it takes you to a different property. Which is really interesting. But that photograph was taken just outside the property, the real property, just the other day by Andrew. So McIntyre means son of a mason. Stansbury, Bury, B-U-R-Y, Stansbury. 18 is the son of 18 is the number of the devil, according to my father. He always said it's not 666, it's 6 plus 6 plus 6 makes 18.
Yeah,
so
I've heard people say that nine is like the number of the devil.
Yep, because the 1 and 8 makes 9. So, you know, this needs to be looked into. My father made it really obvious. In the back here, this never ever had anything built here. That's because there's a bloody great big bunker underneath this shed as well. So there's a bunker, there's a telecommunications bunker under the Macklin Street property, under the main shed. There's a telecommunications bunker under this shed as well. My grandfather, who owned this property before my father, was a telecommunications officer, and he survived 2 wars. My father was a telecommunications officer. Maurice Edward, who owned the Macklin Street Edwardstown property before my father, was also a telecommunications officer. The telecommunications officers are the only ones since the 80s who have access to the maps of all the Telstra tunnels and telecommunications bunkers. They were all removed from the Postmaster General's office in the 80s. So, you know, it's...
Yeah, so it's a very important, specific position for someone to have that job, right?
Yep, exactly.
Just access to that.
Now we're getting to the medical experimentation aspect. So when Tracey Louise was murdered in front of me, just afterwards, my father sat me down to tell me that I had been intentionally infected with what he called at that time scrapie, but later called kuru, which is a prion disorder. It's a faulty protein that makes other proteins misfold. So it's a misfolded protein, and it causes conditions like Creutzfeldt-Jakob, mad cow's disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, a lot of these other horrible conditions. Thank God, according to Dr. Matthias Jacker, or Professor, I think he is, children don't often come down with prion disorder. So I was lucky, even though they tried to infect me on 3 different occasions. This man is Dr. Roy Scragg, an Order of Australia Medal recipient. He's an Adelaide man.
Shit, he looks evil.
He was studying kuru for the World Health Organization, WHO, in the 1950s and 1960s in Adelaide.
Wow.
This is him, Kuru Conference, Dr. Scragg. Now, this is really significant. My May 20... I
don't know too, like kuru, you get kuru from cannibalism.
Yes, it's a cannibal's disease, exactly. Yeah, unless they intentionally infect you with it. So when I put this post up, and this was, thanks to my dear friend, who's a researcher, Julianne, I wouldn't have known this unless she'd found it for me. I put this up and that went viral because it's so significant, because this is the WHO, studying kuru for depopulation purposes. There's no other reason why they would be studying it. So 70 I think it was 75 or 70 cadavers were sent over from Papua New Guinea, where the kuru is apparently rife. Whether or not they took it there to infect people, or they just were studying it for that reason, I don't know. I have misgivings. 75 odd, 70 or 75, I can't remember the exact number right now. I've got it written down. Were taken from Papua New Guinea, flown over to the Adelaide Medical Centre for studies in the 60s, and I was part of that study. So what happens is when the government finds out that you are a pedophile, they then stitch you up. So I think that's what happened to my father. I think he got stitched up, or he was always earmarked for being an ASIO operative because of his lineage, because of his, pedigree. Now, this is Dr. Roy Scragg. These are the Medical Society of Papua New Guinea doctors. His research fellow, or the gentleman he used to have this association with, is called Dr. David Hamilton. I don't know Dr. David Hamilton, but I think it's important to note that I was abused by a Dr. Hamilton. And in my victim of crime application, this documentation in full, all of my hospital admission forms were presented. And the nurse at the time, because I explained to her why I couldn't have it done in this guy's rooms, I had to have it done at the hospital because I was too frightened to have it done in his rooms, because he had already tried to forcibly do this procedure on me without anaesthetic in his rooms. Now, a urethral dilation requires a rod the thickness of my finger forced up your urethra with no anaesthetic.
Oh.
Tried to get his nurse to hold me down while he did it, while I was trying to grab at him and I was screaming. So he's still alive. So
you don't know if that's the same doctor? You don't know?
It's not David. I know who it is, but I won't name him at this point. So I've got to be careful. But I think it's really important that I share that, because
none of these doctors were related to like the Aussie paperclip. Like, were they recently over from Europe? Because like the WHO didn't start until it was after World War II. It wasn't even around that long, was it? It was very much early in its inception.
I got the impression it started in the 50s.
I think it was.
Roy Scragg was working for them in the 50s. So yeah, that would make sense shortly afterwards. Yeah. So again, that Hamilton name comes up a lot. So I wanted to mention this as well. I've spoken about this before. So this is in South Australia. From the 1860s and to the 20th century, Adelaide's tight government, medical, bureaucratic, academic and museological elite customarily stole and swapped the remains of thousands of mostly Indigenous individuals through a range of personal relationships between establishment individuals, Illuminati, connected to the University of Adelaide Medical School, which I mentioned before. Those cadavers were sent to the Adelaide Medical School, the South Australian Museum, the Morgue, the Asylum, the Aborigines Protection Board, and Adelaide Hospital. Thousands of bodies were stolen, collected and traded locally, nationally and internationally. They included skeletons stolen in their hundreds from ancient burial grounds. Others were collected upon request by frontier workers and police, who either came across the dead or killed the living so as to make them collectible. It is no coincidence that some of the skulls in the collection bear bullet holes. Others died on the streets in institutions like the insane asylum. The hospital and hospices for the elderly were anatomized, so they were defleshed, and their heads, skulls and skeletons turned into collection items. One of my father's MOs, he would take the bodies and he would remove the heads, the hands and the feet. I walked in on him. He had a hatchet in his hand in the bathroom, and I was about 4.5. There was a man's foot on the edge of the bath. Heads, you don't want to know. He was collecting things. He was collecting.
Where's this one published, Rachel?
So this is the Room of the Dead. It's a Guardian article in the Guardian. So if you search up the Guardian Room of the Dead, you'll find the article. It can be difficult to search for on Google. I would suggest using DuckDuckGo or one of the other search engines, but it's all in there. And it's a very long article. So, all right. So, and the defleshing, I mean, my father would do that, and then he would try his best to put together the skeletons on the kitchen table. So he was getting them ready as specimens for sale. All right, so this whole thing that was going on, and these are really significant names. Cleland, we've got Cleland National Park, we've got Ramsay Smith, we've got libraries dedicated. During this time, it was stipulated that anyone without family who died in a public institution and didn't express reservation about being anatomized, so this means all the little children that went missing during the Mulligan inquiry, who didn't have family to speak for them and couldn't express reservation about being anatomized because they wouldn't have known what it meant, could then be transferred after they died to the University Medical School for dissection. And it was Indigenous people, but it was all sorts of people. So their bodies were snatched and defleshed. So it's just, this is horrific. And, I'm laughing again because I cannot believe this has been out there for so long and people still feel that the stories that Andrew and I tell about our childhood can't possibly be true. And you just wouldn't believe it. But the 3rd of March, 2025, they've just decided that it's okay for this auction house. They can sell human bones and it's not breaking the law. So this came up over the last year and there was an investigation, but it's okay, they can do it. I forgot to get a screen grab of what their excuse was. And basically what they said was, it wasn't any Australians. They weren't selling Australians. They were selling low caste Indians from over in India. That's their excuse, that it was okay. So we can sell our dead over there and they can sell their dead over here and it's fine. No investigation required. Didn't even say that they were old, just that they were low caste. Oh, it's just disgusting. Ugh.
It's like with these homes and that back, they just had like a harvesting supply of children with no one to speak up for them. They had no rights, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And 150,000 children were sent out from the UK to various countries, including Australia, and their parents weren't even told they were being sent.
Yeah.
4,000 came to Australia, 2,000 went missing. A lot of them went through my father. And so you put this up on your, just your timing was spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Put this up on your channel recently. So sorry it's so fuzzy, but this beautiful poor woman, Juliet Bryant, was talking about when she was being abused by Epstein, she woke up in a laboratory, paralyzed, and that they were doing some sort of experiments on her. Now, they have a paralytic drug that you can be fully conscious, but you cannot move. And I had that experience on many, many occasions. I saw it used on animals. You can be fully conscious, you can make noises, but you can't speak properly. And they do it on purpose so you're alive and awake while they do it. That's just how sick they are. So, this all ties back to what I was saying before about my father being Australia's Epstein. Why this is so significant that they have a Jackie Epstein that writes this article about a radio host being axed, and the Epstein article just underneath the article, the first time I ever get named in the paper. And this is when I was first talking about Epstein, my father being Australia's Epstein was in 2020. So there's a major connection between what my father was doing as an ASIO operative, a Secret Services operative, what Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein were doing, as operatives. My father used to travel around in submarines a lot as a Navy reservist. Ghislaine Maxwell was, a submarine pilot.
There's so much crossover. Yeah, wow. Especially with that, because some of that stuff's came out about Epstein now too, particularly around what was the New Mexico ranch.
Yes.
And that's what I was saying, that he was, those crazy stories that he wanted to reproduce hundreds and hundreds of his own. Like, I don't think we've even touched the tip of the iceberg of what they were really doing there. It's
my father did say, he was a eugenicist also. He used to say he would live on in his children. So, some of my siblings have produced a lot of children, an unusual number of children, and that what he was doing with these children, he was getting rid of them because nobody wanted them, and he was actually helping. That's what he told me. It was helping.
Yeah, like he would have believed that in his own head. Like, actually believed that, yeah. I guess what I want to know is what's happening with the dig at the moment. So that the article you put up, when was that? 20.
So that was I think it was the 1st of March when they started. Actually, it was the end of the Castelloy dig, and they started talking about the 28th of February. One of those days. Where they're talking about doing the dig.
Is there any update or where we're up to at the moment with that?
It still looks like it's going ahead. There's permission for them to do the dig. So it does look like it's going to go ahead. And the reason why I'm doing an interview like this and showing all the evidence, in this format, I've done some of the evidence before in different formats, but if it's presented and it's new, people will pay attention. I want to put the pressure on because, it's people in South Australia who don't follow anything that we do, the alternative level, they now know that Stansbury's considered a very important option. They've got someone that they respect in Cozzy saying we should look at Stansbury. So we need to keep the pressure on to make it actually happen. And as you said, Andrew's put his statements out on his Facebook page. He's finally got access to his Facebook page again, so he's talking about it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like the evidence is just it's mounting. There's so much. So I get the other thing that's really intrigued me, like you said before, everything's timing. So why now? Why do you think that after all these years of try, it's almost like such a weird thing. They're like you're trying and trying for so long, and then what? They're actually talking about, it and they're gonna. So what's
I think
happened? What? Because
the tide has turned.
yeah, do you think it was like in relation to you getting your victims of crime as well? Because that happened last year, and then this happens. Like, what's going on?
So I've been saying since I got that victim of crime payment, every interview I've done that since then, I've said it's about to come out.
Yeah,
They wouldn't have given it to me otherwise. And as I said, it's a small amount of money. It was never about the money. They could have given me $2. I would have been happy. I would have bitched about it, but I would have been happy still because it's not about the money. It's about the title, victim of crime. I've been compensated and considered, a credible witness. And I've got medical documentation, like lots of medical documentation to prove what was done to me.
Mm.
And one of the things that I have medical documentation to prove is one of the MOs of the family murders. Only difference is I survived. A knife was used on me. A professor of proctology proved that occurred. So they can't pretend that those things didn't happen anymore. We've got a major crime detective telling my brother his allegations are 100% true and correct. So it was always going to be coming out. Timing. It's just, and I think, with 87% of the police force in Victoria turning on their chief of police.
and it's just I think it's the timing of everything that's kind of happening within the US too. And like, I know people that they don't have much hope with the Epstein stuff. And like, yes, it's so intricate and there's so many different layers that's being hidden. But at the end, like the public awareness of even the surface level of that's not going away. It's like it's it's there. It's come out. So it's just to me, it's a matter of time. Obviously, they're going to try and quash certain things or quash it moving towards it and opening up a whole other can of worms of what else was going on there. But I, I don't think you can't stop that public perception now. It's too much.
And people also need to take into consideration that Alexander Downer is named amongst some of the things that were going on in the US, and he's a South Australian. So that's another very powerful connection.
That's true. Yeah. Well, this is because that's what the new FBI. That was Kash Patel's whole vendetta because he spent years with all going over all that stuff and that they were speaking about talking to Papadopoulos soon too, and that yeah. And the other one is Turnbull's one of the most vicious on Trump. Like he's most publicly he hates Trump, like hates him passionately. And then I'm like, hang on, he was Kerry Packer's solicitor when they went over and met with Playboy, and Playboy was just the same as the Epstein operation anyway. It's the exact same thing. It was
involved.
It was created by the same types from its inception. So yeah, it's just
the way the world is run through blackmail operations, whether people are actually evil and child predators or not. I was plonked on people when photographs and film taken with people that were completely out to it. Richard Kelvin was a great example. He was completely off his face, and I and Tracey Louise were forced to do things to him, and that was filmed. It's compromised material, and we were considerably younger than him.
yeah.
Maybe they tried to blackmail him and he still wanted to speak out, and then they knocked him off. Poor kid.
Well, I guess we'll just keep our fingers crossed from here, and hopefully, yeah, hopefully this can be the big domino. I feel it like I don't know when, but I think it's going to be in time too. Just because like everyone in Australia knows this case, right? And it's generational too. Maybe not so much my generation, but like especially my mum's. Everyone knows about that, and like they do a special on it just about every year. There's news articles on it constantly. It's almost like they've rubbed it in the face of people, but
Yeah.
I think it feels different this time.
It's a psychological operation to make people afraid. And you'll never get the truth. Look how long the Beaumont case has been going for, and they've never found the truth. So don't try and get your truth out there because it will never happen.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll leave it for there. Until
Thanks.
next time. Oh, sorry, I'll just say, so if you can send me all the most valid links, I guess, of the stuff that we're going through there too, if people want to go I go back and watch some of the old videos and evidence that you've put up because it's like it is very intricate and you've done so many different videos on different aspects. You really just skimmed over a lot there, so that'd be cool.
Yep, absolutely. We'll do that for sure.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Rachel.
Cheers, Dan.